Yeah, I actually chuckled to myself when I was posting that because I literally thought in my head, I was like, Tyler's going to roll his eyes when he sees this. And I was like kind of excited. So I was like partly excited, but also partly excited because I was sort of trolling you at the same time, which is like my favorite thing to do in the world. Welcome, nerds, to another episode of the Nerds You're Looking For podcast, a weekly nerd culture podcast that discusses the culture through various segments. You can find us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. Twitter and Instagram are at The Nerds Podcast. You can check out our website, thenerdspodcast.com. You can check out past episodes on iTunes, Stitcher Radio, basically any good podcatcher you use. My name, of course, is Patrick Kuhn, alongside my co-host, as always, that Tyler Hunt. How's it going, man?
It's going really well. I appreciate what you just did there.
We've been talking about doing that a little bit in the intro, like plugging our stuff at the very beginning, and I always forget to do it. So
yeah, because we know all you motherfuckers turn this thing off whenever we start going with the outro.
Yeah, pretty much. So I was like, I probably should start doing
call
that.
Our listeners motherfuckers, but
yeah, you probably should do that. But yeah, you yell at our YouTube subscribers too when we live stream. So
I do that. I'm really not good at this. I'm an asshole.
Yeah. Being polite or just being another courteous human being. Yeah, you're not good at that.
No, well, I feel like I'm mean to the people that I like. So that just means that I love all of these people that take time out of their week to listen or whatever.
Yeah, I'm feeling a lot of love right now, actually. if you're mean to the people that you like.
I learned it from you.
Well, that's not the case for me because I'm just mean to everyone.
That is true. Good point. Good point. How's your week been?
It's been really good. Just trying to work as much as I can, get a little overtime. But yeah, just hanging out, man. We went and saw Avengers, missed the NFL draft to see Avengers on Thursday, which obviously we're going to review here in a little bit, but it was worth it. It was definitely worth it. I'm kind of over the NFL draft anyways. I'm kind of just like, I was watching it, I guess it would have been Friday night. I was watching it because I wasn't feeling well, so that's why I didn't stream Friday night. And yeah, it's just like every pick. It's like, oh, that was a good pick. Oh, that's a good pick. Like they're 19, 20, 21-year-old kids and they don't want to bash them on national television. So it's like, oh, every pick. I was watching it on the NFL Network, and I'm sure our listeners don't give a shit about the NFL draft, but I'm going to be real brief with this. And literally the guy, one of the guys was giving like an instant like grade, like A, B, and C. Not a single grade was below a B. It was like B every single time. And I was just like, come on, dude, like switch it up. Like, I know that you don't want to bash these kids. But yeah, it's been a good week, man. I went and saw Avengers again last night. So I'm good for the review. I'm a little tired, but yeah, that movie's pretty long.
Yeah, I only saw it Thursday night. I wanted to see it again before we reviewed it, but life got in the way. So I'll definitely be seeing it again because, I mean, we'll get to it in the review, and I mean, we'll preface our review now by saying we're not going to spoil anything. When we do, we're going to do like a spoiler section. So there will be some stuff we talk about later, but we're going to try not to just spoil anything for anybody else. But I don't think it's too much of a spoiler to say that there's a lot to digest.
Oh, yeah.
So it's definitely a movie that I'm kind of itching to see again, just to make sure I pick up all the nuances and all of the story points that were going on, because there's a lot that goes on in that movie.
For sure. So if this is your first episode, we kind of just start off each episode by kind of just checking in with each other. We call it what we're into. So what are you into this week?
So last Sunday, I think it was, after we recorded last week's episode, Brittany, my wife, and I went to see Isle of Dogs. The way I
Okay.
said that made it sound like I went to see it with three people, my wife and somebody named Brittany. But if you're keeping track at home, they're the same person. So no, we went and saw Isle of Dogs, which I'm sure most people are familiar with what the concept is because the trailer played quite a bit over the last 6 months.
And it's in the title.
Yeah, it pretty much the title says it all. Yeah, but this is a stop-go animated movie set in Japan, and in this story, the government has sent all of the dogs in the country to an island of trash to stop the spread of, I think it was dog flu, if I'm not mistaken, but some kind of sickness that the dogs carry. Although at the heart of it, it seems like they just, for whatever reason, dislike dogs, and that was the whole reason that they did it. In the story, a boy named Atari flies to the island to find his dog, and the story kind of takes over from there. So the interesting thing about this movie is that it takes place in Japan, and that being the case, most of the humans speak Japanese, and there are no subtitles, although Frances McDormand plays a translator in the movie, so she does translate some of the things that are going on for us. But the dogs in this movie speak English, so they're easily understood by those of us who only speak that language. So I was excited for this movie because of the animation style and because I'm a pretty big Wes Anderson fan, even though he can be a tad too quirky at times. Out of his filmography, Fantastic Mr. Fox is my favorite of his movies. And this obviously looked to be in the same vein as that. And at the end of the day, overall, I'd say this is a pretty decent movie, but it's not anywhere close to a favorite for me from Wes Anderson. I don't even know if it would make my top 5, to be honest. So don't get me wrong. Like the animation is fantastic. Like I really appreciate what has to go into the art and the time when you do an animated movie like this, and the performances are great as well. There's a crazy talented cast with a lot of Wes Anderson usuals amongst them, and that includes like Edward Norton and Bryan Cranston, Bill Murray, Jeff Goldblum, Greta Gerwig's in it. Like I said, Frances McDormand, Scarlett Johansson, Harvey Keitel, just tons and tons. And I'm like leaving people out too that are still big names. So a very, very talented voice cast. And yeah, I mean, that part of it really does hit, but the story just didn't hit for me like I thought it would. Obviously, you and I are both dog lovers, so I thought this movie would pull on some of my heartstrings a little bit more than it did, but there were long stretches in the movie where I was not interested very much, and I definitely think a more emotional story could have been told with the concept, but the parts of the story that didn't hit for me were a little too quirky, even for me, who, like I said, I'm usually able to tolerate it in the Wes Anderson films. Like I said, I'd recommend this movie, and there were parts of it that I did like, so I hope I didn't come across as too incredibly negative, but I was definitely disappointed given how much I love Fantastic Mr. Fox.
Yeah, it's a little disappointing to hear that you didn't absolutely love it, because it seemed like something, us both being Wes Anderson fans and both being huge dog lovers, it seemed like it was kind of perfect. And I know that you're a huge fan of Fantastic Mr. Fox, and so am I. I'm not sure if I'm as high on it with the course of his filmography as you are. I'm a much bigger fan of Royal Tenenbaums and maybe the Grand Budapest Hotel and stuff like that. So,
yeah.
But Fantastic Mr. Fox is a good one as well. This movie, unfortunately, just kind of slipped through the cracks for me. I was really excited about it, being a big fan, like I said. But when we went to Cleveland to visit you, was like the only weekend it was in Evansville. We talked about this before. Living in Evansville, some of these like indie movies will come later in the season. Like it'll get released in the bigger cities, and then it'll come a few weeks later or a month later. But it usually only stays for about a weekend or maybe two, and unfortunately I wasn't able to catch this one, and it's already gone, so it'll definitely have to be something that I catch when it comes out on video on demand or something like that.
Yeah, that's crazy that it only played for a weekend in Evansville. I know up here, like it started out, and I think whenever they first got it, they had 2 showtimes, and those showtimes must have sold a lot of tickets, because the following week they added more showtimes, and we went on the middle of the day on a Sunday, and it was almost sold out. So obviously, there's people wanting to see this film. So I'm surprised it didn't hit in Evansville.
Yeah, it's kind of weird because like there's 3 theaters that I go to. The one that's closest to my house is probably the worst to go see a movie like this because it's a smaller theater and it doesn't have as many theaters and it just doesn't, I mean, it plays the big movies and that's pretty much it. So that's kind of the theater that I go to as default because it's like 3 minutes away from my house. But the other 2 theaters that I generally go to are a little bit further away, but they're bigger. So I generally have more selection. And I think AMC is the only one that was even showing this out of the
Really?
3. And I think it was kind of like what you said. It was only a couple of times. And so I knew it wasn't going to last very long. And unfortunately, I didn't get to see it.
Yeah, man, that's a bummer. But I mean, its actual release date was a while ago, so it might not be that long before it comes out on video on demand.
For sure, Black Panther's already coming out soon. So
Yeah, it's crazy. So what are you into?
Well, kind of behind the scenes, Tyler and I will not usually discuss what we're going to talk about like in detail, but we usually will just like, hey, what are you going to talk about, just so we don't double up for the sake of conversation. And today we did that same thing, and obviously we're in no danger of doubling up because I'm going to talk about Harry Potter Hogwarts Mystery, which is a new mobile game for Harry Potter fans. And honestly, to call this a Harry Potter game is kind of deceiving. I get why they did it branding wise, but honestly, this game is a very story-based game. And it is set right after Harry gets his scar. So he's a baby, so he's not going to be in this game hardly at all, if ever. Like, I guess you could say, like, when you get later in your tenure at Hogwarts, is it tenure when it's a student? Like,
I don't know, man. I'm not really listening, so no, I'm kidding.
You stopped listening when I said Harry Potter.
No, I think it is tenure.
Yeah, so like, I mean, you have to go to Hogwarts for multiple years. So maybe I'll see him as a toddler. I don't know. But yeah, it's right after Harry gets his scar. So he's not going to really be in this game. But like I said, I understand as a branding thing why they said it's a Harry Potter game. But anyways, for those that aren't familiar, this game came out on this past Wednesday. And I was really excited about it because they kind of have been teasing it for a while now. And basically what it is you're a new student going to Hogwarts for the first time, and it's a very narrative-based game, like I said. It's kind of like a Telltale game where there's not a ton of stuff that you really do as far as the gameplay is concerned. It's really kind of a point-and-click sort of game, and honestly, that might detract certain people from doing it, but I think, and this is a discussion I think we've had before in the past on the podcast, I think that's kind of perfect for a mobile game. Like, I don't want to play a game that I have to do a ton of stuff on my phone. Like, I have a big enough phone, like I can make it work. But for me, that kind of stuff it's really not for me. Like, I play a lot of video games, obviously. So if I wanted a game like that, I would just get it on my Xbox or my PlayStation or whatever. So I don't really want a game like that to play on my phone. I want to play it while I'm sitting waiting for the doctor at the doctor's office, or I'm bored at work or something like that. Like, that's how I play mobile games. I want to be able to be playing it and then being able to set it down and not have to worry about it. And that game, or this game, is perfect for that. Like, it's single player right now. I'm only in year 1 right now. I'm almost done with year 1. So it's single player as of right now. I'm hoping that it continues, because another thing that bothers me about mobile games is sometimes I have to set it down and I don't get to play it for a few hours, or I forget to play it for a day. I don't want like other people to come in and like destroy my town in like a real-time strategy game or something like that. Like, I think that's really shitty, because I'm not going to put that much time into a mobile game. Like, I'm just not going to. So if I go a day or 2 without playing it, I want to be able to come back and not have to worry about it being destroyed. So I like the fact that it's only single player. I will say that this game, for those that complain about microtransactions, it's a mobile game. It's a free mobile game. So you're going to get microtransactions. I personally refuse to do any of that. So basically I get to play for about 15, 20 minutes every about hour, and then I have to wait for my energy to recharge to play it again. So that's pretty much it. But I understand that going in for a free mobile game, like that's just where we are with these games. Like you have to know that that's what's going to happen when you go in. But like I said, what I really like about this game is the fact that it's single player, so you're not competing with anybody. So I've talked about this before with a game that I used to play, Star Wars Force Collection. That was a mobile game with a lot of microtransactions built very similar to the way this Harry Potter game is built. Like you can only play for 15, 20 minutes, and then you have to wait for your battle crystals to recharge, or you buy battle crystals, which I refuse to do. So it was basically I just had to wait for them to recharge, and it's kind of very similar to this Harry Potter game. Well, that's a multiplayer game. So like when you're in tournaments or in your Legion or whatever, there's pressure to buy these battle crystals so you can continue playing. I mean, obviously I refuse to do that, but it's gets to a point where it's hard to compete because these people are dropping a ridiculous amount of money. I think I've shared this story before, but with Force Collection, there was a tournament that was going on and I wanted to crack top 100. I barely cracked 1,000 and I looked at my record and I was like 298-3. So I was dominating in this tournament. And then I looked at the guy that won and he had over 2,000 wins. And I literally, during this tournament, set alarms on my phone to remind me to play like every 30, 40 minutes. Every time I could physically play, like my battle crystals would be recharged. So I played as much as you physically could play during this tournament, and I still didn't even crack the top 100. So these guys were putting just a ridiculous amount of money into this game, and that's kind of what got me away from playing that game and playing multiplayer mobile games, because people are willing to spend money that I'm absolutely refuse to spend. So I am really digging this game for multiple reasons, but the main reason, and I haven't even touched on it yet, is the fact that it's just really cool to be at Hogwarts and kind of be a character and kind of get to go through this, learning the spells and stuff like that. It's very cool. I know I'm very late to the Harry Potter franchise and Harry Potter party, and I kind of feel a little bit like a phony when I talk about how big of a fan I am, because it's only been a few years, but I've really kind of gotten into the franchise and gotten into the mythology and stuff like that. So I'm really digging this game quite a lot. If you're not a fan of the franchise, as I know you aren't, Tyler, I would definitely skip this game. Like, it has no appeal for you whatsoever, because its biggest appeal is the fact that you get to be at Hogwarts and you get to be a student at this school. It's basically like fans of Ender's Game getting to go to battle school, like that sort of thing. So it's very, very cool. I'm liking it quite a lot.
Yeah, man. I was slightly embarrassed whenever you posted your little letter on our Facebook this week, just because I would not be excited to get that letter. But no, I'm kidding. Obviously, it's on my near resolution to watch all of the Harry Potter movies, and I'm happy to say that I've watched one of them. So yeah, getting there. But I just, for whatever reason, doesn't hit for me.
Yeah, I actually chuckled to myself when I was posting that, because I literally thought in my head, I was like, Tyler's going to roll his eyes when he sees this. And I was like kind of excited. So I was like partly excited, but also partly excited because I was sort of trolling you at the same time, which is like my favorite thing to do in the world. So yeah, there's that.
Yeah. Well, it succeeded for sure. So yeah, no, I'm glad. I mean, it sounds like it's fun for you. So good for you, bud. Happy.
Yeah, my wife finally figured out why there's alarms going off on my phone every about 30, 40 minutes yesterday. She's like, is it another stupid game? I was like, yeah. She finally figured it out. She'd been asking me for the last like couple of days, and I've just been kind of just ignoring it just to kind of troll her, because I also like to troll my wife for some reason. And she finally figured it out. She's like, you're so stupid.
Did you tell her it was for the stupidest of stupid games?
I did not.
Cool, man. Good stuff.
All right, so our next segment is just plainly called Comics. Tyler and I read a ton of comics, and we like to spotlight one or two a week. So what'd you read this week?
I read Aliens, Dust to Dust, #1.
Oh, I almost read this, actually.
Yeah, it's pretty good. It's put out by Dark Horse and is written and drawn by a guy named Gabriel Hardman, who I don't know, but overall, like, I think that this is going to be a pretty short conversation around this comic because it's mostly action and horror. So it's hard to really dig into plot details because there's not much plot here, to be honest. But I really wanted to bring it up anyways because I dug it a lot more than I thought I would. This was not a comic I was planning on picking up. I was at my local shop. I think I went Friday getting my usual books, and this one caught my eye because one, obviously it's an Aliens comic, and two, because the cover art is gorgeous. And obviously, like I said, like, I'm pretty glad that I picked it up. The story for this comic picks up right in the middle of the action. It takes place on a human settlement on a different planet, and it's right as a xenomorph attack is going on, and the story is focused on a young boy named Maxon who is kind of awoken by the chaos and stumbles around and finds his mother with a face hugger attached to her face. So obviously, if you know the Alien franchise, it's no surprise that afterwards his mother seems fine. So at that point, we then follow the mother-son duo on a race to escape to a ship that's a few blocks away and is going to get people off the planet. So during this chase, xenomorphs are everywhere, and it's a really cool scene that does a great job of invoking feelings of the horror that you get when you watch the Alien and Aliens movies. So, like I said, there's not too much to talk about from a story standpoint. Like, that's pretty much the gist of it as far as this first issue goes. But I think that a point I want to bring up is if the more recent Alien movies, including Alien Covenant, had resembled a simpler plot like this that focuses on really strong character relationships like a mother and her child, then I think that it would have been a better received movie. So that being said, needless to say, I'm definitely recommending this book. It's a really good first issue, and I'm excited to see where it goes.
So I feel a little torn because I'm happy that you enjoyed the book, but I did not enjoy the book that I decided to read. And so now I'm a little bitter that I didn't choose to read this one instead. Yeah, because it sounds awesome.
You even called dibs on the one that you read.
I know, because I was going back and forth between the book that you just talked about, the Aliens book, and this book, Hunt for Wolverine, that I'm about to talk about. So I'm a little bitter. I called dibs before I started reading it, or I would have just picked something else. Yeah. Because this book is not good, as you can imagine. I'm not really beating around the bush at all. So I realized something. We complain a lot on this podcast, rightfully so, about the recent trend. I mean, I guess it's not that recent, of killing off comic book characters and then eventually bringing them back. And I realized the other day that I am part of the problem with this because I always fall for it. And I mean, as I'm buying this book, I'm kind of rolling my eyes a little bit in my head because I know what they're doing, but at the same time, literally within the last couple of months, I've talked about 3 of these same kind of books that they're bringing back these characters that have supposedly been dead for a few years. So I guess I'm part of the problem because the only reason they're doing this is because people like me fall for it and buy it. So yeah, I should stop doing this because I have not been happy with any of these books that they've done it recently. So basically, if you're not familiar, Wolverine died a few years ago. I think it was like a mini series. It was called Death of Wolverine. I believe the guy that wrote that mini series also is writing this, but I do almost zero research for this podcast, so I could be wrong on that one, but I believe it's the same person that did that one. And I talked about that book a few years ago when we did the episode when the first issue came out, and I liked it. It was pretty good. I thought it was a good send off for the character, and of course they've had X-23 as the all new, all different, or whatever they call it, Wolverine. And I've really liked that book quite a lot, and I thought she's picked up the mantle pretty well for the character. And then, of course, they've had Old Man Logan kind of fill that void as well. So they've had Wolverines in the Marvel comic universe since he died, but they haven't had the Wolverine. And you knew it was just a matter of time before they brought him back because, again, I'm a sucker and I will buy it. I'm sure I'm not the only one, obviously. But yeah, this book was not good. So essentially, there are the scavengers that are trying to grave rob Wolverine's grave. For those that aren't familiar with Death of Wolverine, that miniseries, Wolverine's body was encased in adamantium when he died, and it's kind of like they built like this shrine for him. And the grave robbers decided essentially to steal the shrine because, as they tell you like 3 or 4 times in the book, the Wolverine's body is valuable, but also the adamantium that surrounds his body is also very valuable. So the grave robbers are pretty excited about this. And of course, I don't think I'm spoiling too much that the X-Men come and defend his grave. And there's a bit of a twist, but if you've seen any other movie or read a single other comic book, you kind of see the twist coming. There's a couple of different twists in this book, and they're super, super obvious. And really, honestly, other than the fight between the X-Men and the grave robbers, not a whole lot happens in this book. They kind of reminisce a little bit about Wolverine, but it's very similar to some of the stuff they did in Death of the Wolverine. So yeah, this book was not good. It's literally just a cash grab to bring Wolverine back.
Yeah, I thought that they had kind of sidestepped this with Secret Wars and bringing Old Man Logan into, I guess you would say, the current timeline. So how's that work? Like, is Old Man Logan still a thing? Like, are they both going to coexist or what?
Yeah, I mean, he's just a different entity. So, like, I know he played a part in X-23, like the all-new Wolverine book. Like, he was in there for a while, and it's just, they just treat him like a completely different character. Like, it's weird, like, that's a thing in the book, because she's kind of, like, weirded out by him, because he looks exactly like her father. So it's a little weird, and they have some awkward moments here and there in that particular comic book. But, yeah, he's just kind of treated like a completely separate character.
Dumb.
Yeah. Well, I mean, he is a different character.
Whatever, man. Yeah, no, I almost picked this up because I read Death of Wolverine and I liked it. But yeah, at the end of the day, not a book that I'm going to add to my week. So I'll pass.
I mean, definitely skip it, especially this first issue. I obviously can't speak for the rest of the miniseries, but almost nothing happens in this book.
Yeah, I mean, I guess his death lasted a while. It lasted longer than I thought it would, so.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
All right, man, you ready for nerd news?
Yeah, what do you got this week?
So just a few stories this week. The first one was probably the biggest, and that is that there was a new trailer released for Venom that actually shows Venom, and we both posted a couple things to the Facebook about it. So I did want to bring it up because, like I said, it's something that I know that for a fact that you watched, at least you alluded to watching it on the Facebook. So I think that it looks okay. I'm glad that Venom looks like Venom, but it also looks like it's a really cool version of Venom in a really crappy action movie. So we'll see. I mean, obviously, you're still half a year out from this movie coming out. So, it could be great. We've only seen 2 trailers, but I wasn't a big fan of the action that was in this particular trailer.
No, it looks like a crappy action movie, like you said, and they have been talking for a while, and maybe I just expected too much, but they've been talking about how they want to make this kind of a horror movie. It doesn't look like a horror movie at all. I guess maybe with them kind of talking to each other, there's a little bit of a horror aspect to it. I don't know. But it just seems like a crappy action movie, like a middle of the road popcorn movie. And that's disappointing because I think I just expected a little too much once they started really overplaying the horror aspect of this movie, because just judging by the trailer, which of course is all we can judge it by at this point, it doesn't look like a horror movie at all. But that being said, I was kind of proud of them that they didn't overcorrect with the trailer, because everybody was bitching so much about the teaser trailer that you'd never really see him with Venom. But it was not necessarily subtle by any means. Like, you see him quite a lot, but at least it's not like the whole trailer. Like, I thought that they were going to really, really overcorrect that. And I was kind of proud, so to speak, that they didn't overcorrect.
Well, we still have 6 months. I guarantee by the time this movie comes out, we will have seen Carnage. We will have seen Venom and Carnage fighting in some capacity. I just don't think they're going to be able to hold their load for 6 more months. Like, I think they're going to blow it leading up to the movie in October.
I don't know if I posted this or where I posted it, but there is a GIF that gets me every time, basically, when he's turning into Venom and then all of a sudden googly eyes pop out. It gets me every single fucking time. It is hilarious. So people are having fun with that little moment from the trailer. I know Elizabeth Banks was throwing some serious shade and you posted that. So yeah, people are having fun with this trailer, but all in all, like, seriousness, like, I think that it wasn't as bad as I thought it was going to be.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely agree with the points you made. Like, that first trailer, too. Like, it really leans into the horror aspect. But this trailer obviously does not. So who knows what the finished product is going to look like.
For sure.
All right. So next up, not really surprising because this movie made a lot of money, but A Quiet Place is getting a sequel, which to me is pretty dumb. If you go back and listen to our review of it, obviously both of us gave it positive reviews, just like everybody on the planet is. But, you know, I made the comment that I did think that it was a little gimmicky. And if it wasn't in the first one, it's definitely going to be in the second one. Like, at that point, you're just cashing in on the gimmick, in my opinion. So I, for one, am not excited for the Quiet Place sequel.
Yeah, so either am I, which should be surprising because I definitely liked it a lot more than you did when we reviewed it. I just think that there's certain movies that can just stand alone and that'll be fine, but it did make a shit ton of money. Like we talked about before, it's not too hard for horror movies to make money, like to make a profit, just because they're usually made a little bit cheaper than most other movies. So it doesn't necessarily surprise me because this movie seemed to make a ton of money. But what are you going to do? Like, I don't understand. Like, John Krasinski's obviously not going to be in the sequel. Spoiler alert. I guess I probably should have said that before, because if you haven't seen A Quiet Place, it's a bit of a spoiler. But
a bit of a spoiler.
But so sorry about that. My bad. Well, I mean, it's been out for a while now. Come on.
Yeah, like 2 weeks.
Yeah, I probably should have. I feel bad about that. But anyways, like, I feel like you should concentrate on a different family. Like, I think that's the only way that you can make this film the best possible film that you could make it. Like, I don't think you focus on that family again. I think you go to somebody else, because I doubt that they would do that because Emily Blunt, but yeah, I just feel like you go to a different family.
I think it's the same thing. Like, you know, Jordan Peele wouldn't come back at this point and make a Get Out sequel, because obviously he found his footing with that movie and probably has a lot of other projects that he's able to do. And in the same regard, I don't think that John Krasinski is going to come back and direct A Quiet Place sequel. And if he doesn't come back, I really doubt that Emily Blunt would come back. So I almost think that you 100% focus on a different family or a different area of the country or something like that, because it just, there's no way that I think that they would come back for a sequel.
For sure.
Cool. Last nerd news story I have is kind of more for us because we're personally invested in it, but I feel like we've talked about it enough on the podcast that we might as well kind of follow this through the end. And that regards MoviePass, our good friends at MoviePass, who have had a lot of ups and downs over the years, but obviously they kind of did some stuff that was too good to be true last, I believe, August, when they reintroduced MoviePass for $10 a month. You were allowed to go see movies on multiple viewings. So it used to be you could only see a movie once. Now you could see it as many times as you wanted. And it's kind of a coincidence that they announced this the week that summer movie season kicks off with Avengers Infinity War. But now you have to not only take a picture of your movie stub after you check in to make sure that you're being honest about going to see the movie, but you also cannot see movies more than once in theaters. And I didn't realize this, but if you're new to MoviePass and you go to sign up, you're limited to 4 movies a month.
Yeah.
So I didn't realize that either. So yeah, they're just kind of falling back into bad habits. There's been a lot of talk about when they're going to be profitable, and the CEO says they'll be profitable in 2019. But I guarantee to get to that point, they're going to have to do things like this throughout the rest of the year. And I don't think either of us would be surprised if we end up canceling our movie passes.
Yeah, I mean, it was just a matter of time. I knew eventually I was going to have to cancel it because they were going to do some shady shit again. The fact that you have to take a picture doesn't really bother me. It's going to be a nuisance, but especially when I go to AMC, because AMC, for whatever reason, don't get very good service. So I don't know how I'm going to post the picture to their MoviePass app, and that app sucks. Like, it's awful. So it barely ever works to begin with. So I mean, I've literally checked into movies and I'm not sure if it even works. So I'm like having the anxiety that my card's going to be canceled because it didn't work on the app or something like that. So I've had that a couple of times. So how they think they're going to be able to make it work with posting pictures and stuff like that, I don't know. But yeah, I mean, it's just a matter of time before I cancel it. It is a bummer because I was enjoying the multiple movies. Like, you could see multiple viewings of each movie. And like you said, it's no surprise that they came out with this right before Infinity War. So yeah, that doesn't surprise me. But a lot of these big movies, because you can't do advance tickets anyways, like Solo and Infinity War, and I'm sure Deadpool, I will buy my tickets in advance anyway, so I don't even use MoviePass for that first viewing anyways. So multiple viewings for me, yes, I'm going to use my MoviePass, at least for that second viewing if I go see it again, because I didn't use it for the first one anyway. So that doesn't really affect me as much, but yeah, it's only a matter of time before I cancel this, because they're gonna up the price for sure.
Yeah, I mean, it says in their terms and conditions, like, they have the right to change pretty much anything at any point, and also they have the right to your firstborn child. So, I mean, it's just a shady company. But we knew it was too good to be true when they announced this, and I feel like, I'll probably get a good year out of it. I would imagine it probably around August is whenever it'd get to the point that I can't do it, like with either prices or limits on what you can go see, yada, yada, yada. So, a year for $10 a month to see whatever movie I want, like, it's not a bad deal. So I can't get too upset about it, because I used to pay $30 for the same thing when it first rolled out, and I would keep track to make sure I was getting my money's worth. So I've definitely gotten my money's worth over the last few months for sure. So
absolutely. So I'm actually, yeah, for sure. So I'm actually surprised, and maybe it's just me because I don't keep up with trailers and synopsis and stuff like that of movies, because I've talked so much about it on the podcast in previous episodes. Like, I want to be somewhat surprised. I am really surprised that you didn't bring up the new Jurassic World trailer.
I thought
because I went and saw it when we went. My wife and I went to Infinity War, and I turned to her. I was like, "Why would you do that? They spoiled half of the fucking movie in that new trailer." Like, I had no idea, because up until this point, you only see them on the island.
Yeah. I
what
mean,
the fuck?
For some reason,
I was so pissed.
I had it on Nerd News last week, and for some reason it didn't. Like, I forgot it, or I accidentally deleted it off the list. But it's basically Lost World.
Yeah, I mean, it's exactly Lost World.
Yeah, a remake of Lost World. So,
but I mean, it pisses me off because I didn't know that was going to happen, and if I had gone into the theater not knowing that was going to happen, that would have been pretty cool. I mean, I would have just rolled my eyes because it was Lost World, but at the same time, like, now I know what's going to happen in this movie, and it just pisses me off.
Yeah, spoiler alert, they get off the island.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm spoiling stuff left and right today. So no, oh my God, that pissed me off so much. Like, I literally looked at my wife. I was like, why would they fucking do that? Like, why? I don't even understand that. Just keep it on the island so people don't know. Like,
yeah, man.
I was so disappointed.
It's frustrating. And
people wonder why I don't want to watch trailers.
No, I mean, it makes sense for sure. Like, I get where you come from with it. There's so many things that, you see something in the trailer. So a moment of peril is like, well, they get out of this because I haven't seen this scene from the trailer yet.
Yeah.
So obviously there's still more movie to go. It takes away from the whole experience. Like, I think the trailer should definitely be more vague.
For sure. And I know we've gotten to the point where you're going to get 2 or 3 trailers, so they have to put into some new stuff in there, but come on. Like, if you have something like this, don't put it in the fucking trailer.
Like, don't even show anything from the last third of the movie. Like,
yeah.
Let me guess what the climax of the film is going to be. Like, I don't need to know that.
Yeah, for sure.
Cool.
All right. So, like we talked about at the intro, obviously we're going to be reviewing Avengers Infinity War, which of course is the 3rd Avengers film. I guess if you don't throw in Captain America Civil War, which was kind of an Avengers film. It's also the 19th Marvel Cinematic Universe film. This film was directed by Russo brothers, as I like to call them, Ru Bros.
No, I'm not going to laugh at that.
I texted you that, and then you didn't respond to it, and I was very disappointed because, again, I love trolling you.
I don't remember getting that text.
Yeah, I texted you about the Rubros are going to make something better. I don't remember what we were talking about.
Deadly Class.
Yeah, because they're going to produce it or direct it or write it. I don't remember exactly what the story was. But yeah, they're going to make a TV show of Deadly Class.
You sure did say that, and I definitely ignored you.
So yeah, I do think it's just a troll, Tyler. But Rubros works. It's gonna stick for sure. But if you're not familiar, obviously they did the last 2 Captain America films. Essentially, the synopsis for this film is the Avengers must put away their differences to stop Thanos from collecting all of the Infinity Stones so he can destroy half of the universe's population. At this point in our review, kind of introducing the movie, we always kind of talk about our expectations or our excitement or anxiousness or whatever going into a film. But I kind of, at this point, group the Marvel Cinematic Universe films into like the Star Wars, like almost in the same category with me. Like, of course, we're going to be excited going into these movies. Like, I was actually more excited than I thought I was going to be, like, going into it. I almost felt like kind of going into it similar to how I was going into like The Force Awakens. Like, this might be the most excited I've been since I saw The Force Awakens. Like, it just felt like we were finally getting the finale that we've been waiting for. Like, of course, we've had big moments like Civil War and stuff like that, and we've seen some really cool shit in the 10 years that we've had the MCU, but like, this is Thanos. Like, he's the biggest bad of all the big bads in the Marvel universe. So we are finally getting it. Like, he's been teased so much in little like snippets here and there in these movies. So we finally got it. Like, I literally at one point, and I'm a little embarrassed to admit this, but while we were walking into the theater, I jumped up and clicked my heels. So that happened. So I was a lot more excited going in than I thought I was going to be. And I super excited.
I'm just going to let you marinate in the fact that you jumped up and clicked your heels.
Yeah, I was actually surprised because I haven't done that in a long time, and I didn't think I was going to be able to pull it off, but I nailed it. I clicked my heels like a boss. The guy behind us walking, which I didn't know he was there, or I wouldn't have done it, he laughed, so I nailed it.
So what I'm getting from this is not only did you jump up and click your heels in the theater, but it was not the first time you've done so.
Oh, no. I've clicked my heels before, for sure. It's been a couple of years. I save it for special occasions.
I don't know how I'm going to focus on this review now. No, I mean, I'll echo everything you said. Like, obviously, super exciting stuff. The culmination of a lot of stories that we've been personally invested in. I would say there was a little bit of a damper on this movie because obviously we know that there is another Avengers movie coming out next year. So I knew that not everything was going to be resolved in this movie, or we weren't going to get the full story in this movie, because at one point these films were called Avengers Infinity War Parts 1 and 2, and obviously the movie that comes out next year is going to get a new title that they haven't released yet, so who knows what that'd be. But I was very excited for sure, but I knew that I was going to probably be left wanting a lot more after this movie was over.
Oh yeah, for sure. And like you said earlier, we're going to do a regular review like we normally do, and we're going to be super vague and try not to spoil anything. And then we're going to go into full spoilers. So it's my week to edit. I will go ahead and throw an extra show note in the show notes. So definitely, if you have not seen this movie and do not want anything spoiled for you, just go ahead and check the show notes and skip ahead. We're actually going to do a special nerd favorite this week and kind of give our updated top 5 Marvel Cinematic Universe films. So if you want to hear that discussion, definitely skip ahead and skip the spoiler section. So
wait, before we dive in, I have a quick question.
Okay,
did you see this movie with Chrissy?
I did. The first time I saw it last night, I was by myself.
I just wanted to make sure you weren't like clicking your heels by yourself, because that would have made it a lot weirder.
I feel like you're focusing way too much on that detail. Like, let's get into the movie that we've been excited for 10 years and not talk about my clicking my heels.
You brought it up for a reason.
I know. I brought it up because I wanted to brag about how I click my heels, and I nailed it. But anyway, I'm starting to regret it. But yeah, so we're going to be super vague, and I was actually watching this movie thinking, like, how are we going to review this without talking about spoilers? Because I feel like basically once you get into about 10 minutes of this movie, it's all spoilers. Like, you almost can't talk about this movie without talking about spoilers. So our spoiler-free part of this review is going to be pretty vague and I think probably pretty short, because it's going to be tough for us not to spoil this. But you actually talked a little bit. You kind of touched on something that I want to bring up in my broad strokes, so I'm just going to dive right in if you don't mind.
Yeah, for sure.
So, like you just said, at one point, these movies were going to be called Infinity War Part 1 and Part 2, and for whatever reason, they decided against that, kind of like what Justice League did with that film. They were going to make it Part 1 and Part 2, and then they just kind of crammed it all into one hot mess of a movie. Well, Marvel decided not to do that, but they weren't going to call it Part 1 and Part 2. I love this movie. I think it's safe to say that I'm going on a limb and to say that you probably loved it as well. But my biggest complaint for this movie, and my only complaint for this movie, is that it ends, but it doesn't have an ending. And I was going to see it twice anyways, but I felt like I absolutely had to see it twice when I finally saw that ending, because I was so angry. Like, I didn't want that to be my last moment with this film, because I literally wanted to just to scream out like fuck when they ended this movie, because I knew I had to wait another year. Like, I was so angry that we waited this long and then had that be the ending. So I was pretty upset about that. So I knew I needed to see it again, just for all the reasons that you said, that it's just a super long movie and there's a lot of stuff going on and there's a lot to digest it, but just so that wasn't my last emotional response to this movie. Fantastic movie. Just the fact that it doesn't have an ending. It just kind of ends is very disappointing. That being said, I don't want my whole broad strokes to be negative, because that's really my only complaint for this movie. Of course, I have a few nitpicks here and there that we'll get into, but I will say that it's a 2.5 hour movie, and we complain a lot about runtime on these reviews, but it's not 2.5 movies, like, or 2.5 hours. Like, it doesn't feel like that for this movie. Like, you don't feel that 2.5 hours. Like, it moves really, really briskly.
Yeah, man, I could have used another half hour.
Yeah, for sure.
So
I could use a whole nother movie.
Overall, I would say this movie was pretty terrible. It's garbage.
Shut up.
No, I mean, obviously, I really enjoyed the movie quite a bit. I thought that it was very balanced, and they did that very well and showed the different sides of a very intricate story extremely well. There were some story beats that didn't make much sense to me, but overall, I'd say it was a pretty fun ride that did a good job with character development and humor and setting itself apart from the other Marvel movies that have led up to this. It definitely feels like something new and something different, especially compared to Avengers and Avengers Age of Ultron, which I really appreciated. I share some of these same gripes as you, and I think that I'll just kind of save mine for the spoiler section because I don't want to allude to anything. But yeah, I think with that being the case, I'll probably just kind of shut my mouth there so I don't spoil anything.
Okay, so the next segment, for those that have been listening to the podcast for a while, you guys know that we're going to talk about story. This will probably be the shortest story segment we've ever had, just because there's so much that we could spoil in this review that obviously we don't want to, that we'll save for the spoiler section. So I don't have very many notes for this story that I felt like I could talk about without having some sort of spoiler, because I kind of get in my head when I do that, because I don't know what other people that are listening consider a spoiler. So what'd you feel about the story?
Overall, I really appreciate what they did with the story. Kind of like what I said in broad strokes. I like you've said, I'm going to have to be very, very broad here because I do not want to spoil anything until we get to that section. But this story definitely takes risks and tries to set itself apart from the other Avengers movie and does a very good job of doing so. I think some of the threads throughout the story were a little forced, and as the story kind of bounces around to the different groupings of characters, there were definitely some that I liked more than others, but overall it was pretty good stuff, and it definitely had heartfelt storytelling, which is a big win for me. It's somewhat easy, I guess, to forgive some of the other coincidental aspects of the story, given how much had to go into getting all of these characters together and to get the story going, because there was a lot to cram into a 2.5 hour movie. And I think they did that pretty well.
Yeah, for sure. And what I really liked about this movie is that we've waited so long for Thanos, and he's just been kind of teased here and there, just for like little tiny clips here and there. And I liked that we finally knew we were getting him in this movie. Obviously, just judging by the trailers and the fact that it's called Infinity War, you knew you were going to get Thanos. But I thought that they were going to kind of tease him even within this movie for a little bit, but we actually got him right away. And not only did we get him right away, but you get him fighting right away, and you get him fighting the Hulk right away. I don't think that's too big of a spoiler. Like I said, I kind of got in my head a little bit when I was taking these notes, what I should put in the spoiler or not in the spoiler section. But I love that they you got to see him fighting, because you don't get to see him fighting too much in this movie. But I liked that they fought the Hulk, or he fought the Hulk right off the bat. So I thought that was pretty cool. And I also liked how it kind of established how formidable he is, even without the stones. Like, because at that point he only had I think one stone at that point. So
well, in all
I
fairness,
thought
he had the Power Stone. So
yeah,
that's probably pretty helpful in taking on the Hulk.
Oh yeah, for sure. But I just liked the fact that they kind of established that he could hold his own even without the stones. Like it just establishes how formidable a villain he is. I will say that some of the story aspects, like you said, seem forced, and I think some of the emotional moments with Thanos was what felt forced for me. And I understand why they did it, and I understand that it's crucial to a certain part of the movie that it's like that. But yeah, I don't think of Thanos in that way. Correct. And that was what kind of bugged me a little bit. And obviously, again, being super, super vague. But I will say that I liked the fact that it pulled a lot from the Infinity crossover event from the comics, because it hasn't been that long since that's happened. Like, we had just started the podcast. Like, I feel like that was the first event that happened in Marvel Comics that we talked about on the podcast. Like, I know I probably brought it up at least once or twice on the podcast when we first started out, so don't listen to it. But I like the fact that something, because it's hard for me to, like, while I'm reading it, I know these big events matter, and they sent ripples throughout the comics and eventually the movies. But to have a big event like that, and then a few years later have it actually matter in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, I thought was pretty cool. Most notably, of course, they bring the Black Order, and that was something that was introduced in that crossover, which I think they call them the Children of Thanos in the movie. Like, I don't think they ever call them the Black Order in this movie. But yeah, I thought that was pretty cool that they took something from a recent comic event in Marvel that I really liked, actually. The only thing that they didn't really take from that is, of course, the Inhumans play a big role in that comic event, and obviously they're not in there. But yeah, I really liked that aspect of it. But like you said, some of the stuff was a little bit forced, but for the most part, I thought the story was pretty well done. I will say that I didn't really like his motivation to do what he did. Like, I thought that was kind of forced as well. It kind of felt like Kingsman all over again. Like that was pretty much the philosophy behind why he was doing what he was doing. And so I thought that was a little cliche, but all in all, I mean, the film is so fun and so action packed that you kind of forgive a lot of those things.
Would you have rather them done what he does in the comics, where he's like courting death, like trying to win her over?
I don't know if they could do that in the movie. Like, I think that comes off as too... I mean, obviously it comes off as comic booky because it's in the comic book, but like, I don't think that appeals to a wider audience. So I get why they kind of took her out of it.
Yeah, I read an interview with the Rubros the other day.
See, it's already sticking.
No, they were saying that it would have been too much to like add that character in and add some development to her and explain why Thanos wanted to court her and so on and so forth. So I get why they didn't do it, but you're right. I mean, how many other motivations can somebody have for wanting to, wipe out half the galaxy? For
sure. So that's it for our story part of our non-spoiler review. We'll move right along to performances. How'd you feel about the performances in this movie?
I mean, come on. Like, what is there to say here? Like, no bad performances in my book. Almost every single person has played their character before and excels at it. There's one character that sticks out to me as I really could have done without him. And I mean, it's not a gripe about his performance. I guess maybe I could have put this in story, but there was a lot of mystery around what character Peter Dinklage was playing in this movie, and I'm not going to spoil who it is, but it was kind of dumb in my opinion. And those were the beats in the story that I found myself really not interested in. Whenever you kind of focus in on Groot, Rocket, and Thor. Wasn't really part of the story that I really enjoyed. So I think that was kind of a lame part of it. And again, maybe this went in story and not performances. I don't know that it was Peter Dinklage's fault, but I don't know that he was great in that role either. So I guess that would be my only complaint. But I think almost everybody else, they've played these characters before. It's for some of them for 10 years. So to me, they're just doing what they do at this point. Like, they are those characters.
Yeah, I mean, that's my first note, is that we've talked about this before, but some of these actors have been playing these characters for 10 years in multiple films, so they obviously have their performances down. And I think I talked about this when we did our Thor Ragnarok review, is I'm not sure if I necessarily like Mark Ruffalo as the Hulk. Like, I kind of gave him a pass in Thor Ragnarok because I kind of made the excuse that he's coming back from being the Hulk for 10 years or whatever it was, and then he's kind of dazed and confused. And I guess you could say the same thing a little bit for this film. I don't know if I necessarily like his Bruce Banner that much. Like, he's obviously a talented actor because he's in spotlight and he's been nominated for awards and stuff like that. He's obviously a very, very talented actor. I don't know if he's necessarily phoning it in or if it's just a character choice that I just don't like. I don't know. I just don't like his Bruce Banner. So maybe that's just my own personal opinion. Well, obviously it's my own personal opinion, but all that being said, that was pretty much the only complaint I had with the performances. I love Chris Hemsworth and Chris Pratt's chemistry in this movie. It's probably, I mean, you don't see them together too much, but when they are together, I thought they were pretty good. That little frenemies little vibe that they had going, I thought that was pretty cool. And I love that they kind of kept Thor's tone, a kind of more comedic performance like you see in Thor Ragnarok. I kind of like that they kept that going in this movie as well. I thought that Josh Brolin's voice really worked as Thanos. Like, he has a very like deep voice and kind of unique voice. So I thought that he had some good power behind it. Of course, they probably touched it up a little in post and made it a little bit more formidable there. But I thought that he was a good choice for Thanos. So I appreciated that. Speaking of Thanos, this is going to be a kind of weird, and it's not really necessarily performance wise, but I wish that Cole Obsidian, which I've never heard his name pronounced before, he's one of the Black Order. I kind of wish that he played a bigger role, just because the mocap was done by Terry Notary or Nodor, or I've never heard his. There's no way that I pronounced his name right, but he plays Rocket from Planet of the Apes. He does the mocap for that particular character. So I kind of wish that the Black Order played more of an important role in this movie. But that's just a personal thing for me, because I like him. And he was also in, he played some side characters in The Hobbit and stuff like that. So
you wish the Black Order played a more prominent role because some no-name from Planet of the Apes does the mocap for one of them.
Yes.
Okay, yeah, I gotcha.
Okay, cool. Anyways, and this is not my last little bit is more about story than necessarily performances, but I didn't really buy the Vision Scarlet Witch thing. Like, their relationship, I didn't really buy, and we'll get into a little bit more about that in the spoiler section, but I don't know. I just didn't really like it that much. But yeah, that was my main complaint about the performance. It was Mark Ruffalo. I just didn't buy his Bruce Banner.
Well, unfortunately, they made some particular character choices with the Hulk and with Bruce Banner, so you got a lot of Bruce Banner in this movie. So
yeah, I mean, his comic relief, or like his one-liners and stuff like that towards the end was fun. Like, I liked his character. I don't know what it is about it. He just seems like he's playing it a little silly. Like, it's a comic book movie, so he feels like he has to play a little silly. Like, I don't know. I don't buy it. All right, so action, pretty much half of this movie is action. So what do you feel about it?
I mean, it's always really great. Like, I don't know that I've ever complained about the action in one of these Marvel movies. I don't think it's ever been bad. And the Russo brothers, for whatever reason, know their way around it, like, even though they come from like a sitcom background. So all of it's really great. Like, the climax of the movie is amazing. The beats on, I think my favorite is probably the stuff in New York at the beginning of the film, just because that seems like more ground level stuff that I'm typically into. So yeah, I mean, definitely no complaints about the action. I think there's room for there to actually be more of it, to be honest. Like, I think that at a certain point, like, with this movie, everybody expected it there to be like this end scene where all of the heroes are fighting together, and it's kind of similar to what we saw in the first Avengers movie. And, we don't necessarily get that in this film. It might come in Avengers 4. So I think that aspect of it disappointed me a little bit. But overall, I mean, how are you going to complain about it?
Oh, yeah. I mean, there's so many different scenes. Like I mentioned a little bit in the story. I love that Thanos and Hulk go at it very, very beginning of this movie. Like, basically the opening sequence of this movie, they go at it, and that was pretty awesome. I really liked the Thanos v Iron Man, Doctor Strange, Spider-Man stuff towards the end of the movie. That was pretty cool. I will say that I like the fact that each of the Infinity Stones kind of did their own thing. Like, they didn't just make it like, oh, he's super powerful now. Like, they actually made him use them in a way that makes sense with the stone. So I appreciated that. But it was a lot of him just closing his fist, and little like rays were coming out of his fist. And so I liked the stuff where he was a little bit more of like hand-to-hand combat stuff, like with the Hulk. So towards the end, when he has most of the stones, it was a little bit less of that and more of him just kind of closing his fists and destroying everybody. So that was a little bit disappointing, but I loved the action in this movie otherwise.
For sure, man.
All right, so let's go ahead and let's talk about the spoilers before, or should we give it a star rating before so we can kind of put a cap on it and then we'll go into spoilers?
Yeah, that's fine. I'm good with that.
All right, so what do you feel out of 5 stars, Avengers Infinity War?
I'm giving it a 4, and I will explain some of why I did not give it a 4.5 when we get into spoilers.
Okay, cool. So I am also giving it a 4 as well. And I also will kind of dive more into why in the spoiler section. So like I said, I'm putting a special show note in this particular episode. So if you don't want anything spoiled for you, now's the chance to fast forward it to our top 5 Marvel Cinematic Films so far discussion, which you will find that information again in the show notes. So you have been warned. I've been kind of buying you a little bit of time to fast forward. So at this point, you should be gone by now. And we're going to jump right into spoilers. So Tyler, wow. Where do we even start with this movie?
I think that, I don't know. There's obviously so many story beats to talk about. I think the elephant in the room is, of course, the ending of the movie. So I don't know if you want to start there, or if you want to lead up to it.
I mean, let's just kind of go in chronological order with this movie. I will say that I love the Hulk v. Thanos stuff that I talked about in the non-spoiler part of this review, but I really wasn't crazy about like, oh, he can't do Hulk anymore in this movie. Like, I get why they did it because the Hulk is so powerful. He's the most powerful Avenger. So if they had the Hulk, this movie wouldn't be there wouldn't be as much danger. Like when they're fighting the Black Order, the Hulk would just destroy them. So I get why they decided to get away from that, but I didn't really like the rationale, or the lack of rationale why he can't be the Hulk anymore.
Yeah, I think that I read an article that speculated it was because the Hulk got his ass kicked by Thanos, and he was kind of bitter about it and afraid. And
I mean, that's what I inferred from it as well. Like, he was afraid of it. Like, he's never, because you can kind of get that a little bit while they're fighting, is that he's kind of surprised that he's stopping him, because he's never had that before.
Yeah, so I mean, I get that side of it, but I think that it's something that should have been rectified by the end of the movie.
For sure. Obviously that's something that we'll probably get in Avengers 4.
Yeah, the Hulk should have absolutely been in the climax of the movie. And I even at him busting out of the Hulkbuster armor as the Hulk, like after that armor is destroyed, like I think something needed to happen there. So it was weird that he only shows up at the beginning of the film, gets his ass kicked, and then we don't see him again.
Yeah, that was definitely disappointing for sure. And then of course we have diving right into one of the biggest spoilers you see right away is that of course Loki dies, and I thought that was actually a really cool way for him to go. Like, I feel like he kind of redeemed himself, even though he did still have the Tesseract. I thought that, but I thought that was perfect for the character. Like, you knew he was going to take that, right? Like, at the end of Thor Ragnarok, like, that fits the character so well. So I appreciated that he already had it. The fact that he didn't use it was kind of weird. Like, they're getting attacked and the ship is getting destroyed, and he has this powerful weapon and he didn't use it. That kind of bugged me a little bit. But his send-off, and I hope that it lasts. Like, I really hope that, because that's kind of the perfect send-off for that character, I think. He kind of finally redeems himself.
Yeah, I would have liked to see, I think that character has so much history, and he's one of the oldest characters in this universe at this point. I would have liked to have seen maybe a more majestic send-off than him just getting choked out by Thanos at the beginning of an Avengers movie. I think he might have deserved a little bit more. Same with Heimdall. But at the end of the day...
Yeah, that one was disappointing for me, for sure.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, what was Loki going to do in this movie? So the biggest question I have around that scene is... it kind of diminishes Thor Ragnarok a little bit, and I really hope that Korg and Valkyrie didn't just die off screen. I hope that they're maybe out there somewhere and they come in to play in the next Avengers movie. But if they just died off screen and they're never heard from again, that's going to be pretty disappointing to me, because those were some characters I really liked in that film.
Yeah, I was thinking about that too. Like, it didn't occur to me the first time I saw it, but the second time I was like, man, some of those characters were really cool, and now they're dead because they blew up their ship. I don't see how they could have survived. Like Thor could survive because he's essentially a god, but I mean, I don't see a whole lot of people on that ship that could have survived that. So, yeah, that was a little disappointing. And then what else did I want to talk about? I mean, obviously the Vision and Scarlet Witch stuff, like I mentioned, just feels forced. It almost kind of felt like The Walking Dead, where they were building up a relationship and you knew that, well, I mean, you knew because Vision has the Mind Stone that was going to be a problem for him later in the movie. But the fact that they were building up that relationship just kind of felt like it's something The Walking Dead would do, like build up a relationship. Oh, and you know that one of these people are going to die now. And so, yeah, that didn't really surprise me too much. What happens to Vision? Well, I guess we're in the spoiler section, so I don't have to be vague. Vision dies.
Well, I mean, if I'm remembering correctly, doesn't Scarlet Witch also die?
So let's be clear. Those people aren't dead.
Correct. And that is, I mean, I'll save it for when we get to that point in the movie, unless you want to jump into it. But
that's the biggest spoiler that I wanted to talk about.
That is why I did not give this movie a 4.5.
Maybe it's just because I'm super, super cynical, but like, the woman next to me, like I saw this movie with my wife, and so there was just a random person sitting next to me at the end of the row, which props to her not caring about going to see a movie by yourself. That's awesome on you, because I am definitely in that camp. I saw this for the second time by myself, so I have no problem with that. But she was literally bawling at the end of this movie, and I was just thinking, they're developing a Black Panther 2. He's one of these people that fades out of existence. He's coming back. I mean, I don't understand like why. I mean, I get it. Like it's a powerful part of this movie, but I mean, you know that they're coming back.
No, that's the problem, and that's the issue with the culture that we're a part of and we've created, is that we want more and more and more. And Marvel's like, here's more and more and more. Here are all the movies that are coming out, and while they haven't technically announced anything past Avengers 4 next year, obviously they're not going to kill Black Panther. His movie just made $1 billion. Like, yeah, they're going to keep pumping those out. They've talked about Homecoming 2, so obviously Spider-Man's coming back. Like, the one thing I will say is that everybody went into this movie thinking like, well, obviously people are going to die, and it's going to be the people whose contracts are up and aren't going to do these movies anymore. So either Captain America or Iron Man, or both of them, and characters like that have been around for forever. And I like that they turned that on their head and turned everybody's expectations upside down by basically killing everybody that is new.
Yeah.
The only people that made it are the characters that have been around since the first Avengers.
Yeah, the OG Marvel Cinematic Universe characters. Yeah. So
why do you? So
that's a good point.
Why do you think out of all of the Guardians, the only one that they left alive was Rocket?
I don't know. I thought to myself, I tried to like rationalize it, like maybe because he's genetically modified. I don't know if that has anything to do with it.
I guess maybe you just have to leave one of the Guardians of the Galaxy alive, so whenever the rest of them come back to life, it carries more weight. And you're going to get to see Rocket be emotional about it or something.
Yeah, because you don't see that, but it is kind of teased, and well, not really teased in Volume 2 that he does have these emotions for sure, and he kind of pushes people away to protect himself. But I will say that, like, my wife and I were counting the people that actually legitimately died, and for a big movie like this, it's really only 3, right? I mean, the Black Order, most of them die, right? I think all of them die, but they're not big characters by any means. They just got introduced in this movie. But like Loki, Vision, and Gamora are really the only 3 that really die in this movie. Because the rest of them that fade away are gonna come back.
I really hope that their death carries weight and they don't come back, but I don't see how Gamora doesn't come back.
I don't know, man. I disagree. I don't see how you could. I understand where you're coming from, but I don't see how you could bring her back and it not cheapen this movie.
I think that something's gonna happen with the Time Stone. They're gonna go back in time. Everybody's gonna come back to life. They're gonna have a big battle at the end of Avengers 4, and that's whenever Captain America, Iron Man, or both are gonna bite it.
Yeah, for sure.
So I mean, I think that in my head that's what's gonna happen, and I don't know how. I don't know, maybe it's just me refusing to believe that Gamora is dead because I like her so much and she plays such an integral part in the Guardians of the Galaxy, which are by far my favorite movies that Marvel has put out. So maybe again, that's just me refusing to believe it.
For sure. Like I said, kind of teased a little bit in the non-spoiler part of the review. That part of this movie kind of bugged me a little bit. Like, I just didn't buy. For me, Thanos is just this, just not feeling, just pure evil, like Michael Myers type of character. And the fact that they try to make it some emotional character, like he had some deep reasoning behind what he was doing, and that he had to sacrifice the thing that he loved for the Soul Stone so he could have all of them and he could accomplish this important mission. Like, his mission's more important than his own feelings. I just didn't buy, because he's not that character.
Yeah, but I mean, I feel like I can't complain about that, because I complain, especially in movies like this, so much about having weak villains. And I think if you just have like a villain that is purely evil and you don't explain why he's purely evil, that it's weak. Like, it's kind of like Ronan. It would remind me of Ronan in Guardians of the Galaxy. So I appreciate that there is like this emotional side to Thanos, and what he is doing, he believes is correct and is right, and is what's best. I do appreciate that the ending of this movie is, I'm not a genius for making this comparison. I think a ton of people have made this comparison, but it's very Empire Strikes Back. It's very like, you end on a very, very down note. So it's definitely left. I mean, you spoke to it when we were doing the review part of this. Like, it definitely left me wanting more. Like, I wanted to find, like, it pisses me off so much that I have to wait a year, because now it sounds like Ant-Man and the Wasp takes place after Civil War, so it's not impacted by any of this, so we don't see anything there. And then of course Captain Marvel comes out, and that takes place in the 90s. So do you want to get into the stinger, since we were talking about Captain Marvel a little bit, and then we can kind of put a cap on this review? I got one more thing for spoilers.
Oh, okay, cool.
Marvel.
Sorry.
So, what'd you think about Red Skull?
I thought it was forced. They didn't even get the guy. Like, it's a different character. Like, it's a different person playing that character. Like, I feel like they needed somebody that was important, so they just picked out somebody that they didn't use for a while.
Yeah, I mean, I liked it because I love Red Skull, and everybody's been saying since, Captain America ended, whenever he's pretty much teleported out, like, he's still alive somewhere. So I appreciate that he's alive somewhere, but it doesn't really fit the character that he's just like the keeper of the Soul Stone now. Yeah, like that part, that's a big leap for me, but I do appreciate that he was still alive.
They kind of try to justify that in his little speech, but yeah, I didn't buy it.
Yeah, I mean, I will say I was like legitimately shocked whenever he showed up.
Yeah, I was surprised. It didn't even occur to me. It's been a while since I've watched First Avenger too. It didn't even occur to me that he would even play a part at all in this movie. So I will give him that I was pretty surprised.
Yeah, and I guess I read an interview with Hugo Weaving saying he'd never do it again, and I guess that is true. So
yeah, pretty much.
Speaking of no-name actors, that's exactly what they got for the Red Skull.
For sure.
Cool. So
speaking of The Walking Dead, actually.
Yeah. Okay, so the stinger.
So I was actually kind of hoping that they wouldn't even have one on this movie. It's 2.5 hours. I mean, I know they're Marvel Cinematic Universe movies, and they kind of have to have one. Like, I feel like it's almost legally obligated to have one. But I didn't feel anything for this stinger at all. Like, it just didn't do anything. It didn't move the needle for me at all.
I think the audience I was with would have burned the theater to the ground if there wasn't a stinger.
Yeah, and I think that's the reason they had this. But, I mean, it's just kind of like a minute or two longer of people just phasing away. Like, that's all it is. Oh, and he calls Captain Marvel. Okay, cool, whatever.
I do like that, he started to say motherfucker. And
yeah.
I thought that was well done. And, I mean, I get it. Like, one, it sets up Captain Marvel for next year. Like, we know that movie's coming. And then it kind of gives a very, very brief glimmer of hope in a very, very down ending.
Yeah, but the only thing that bothers me about that is if he's calling her right now, he's like, oh shit's really hitting the fan. Let me call him Captain Marvel. It kind of downplays some of the other movies. Like, oh, he didn't think it was important to call her before.
Yeah, I guess maybe we'll get those answers in the movie next year. But I definitely get what you're saying.
Yeah, so unless you have anything else, I think that's it. I think this might be one of the longer reviews we've had.
I am kind of curious about something.
Sure.
So obviously they've been out doing Avengers press like over the last 2 weeks, and like they did every night on Jimmy Kimmel Live, they had like 4 of the Avengers come in, and the thing that I've noticed about these movies and this fandom is it is really starting to remind me of something like Twilight. Like, I don't know. I don't want to diminish it, but I'm really starting, like, because I'm part of this fandom. Like, don't get me wrong, like, I'm balls deep in this fandom, but that face you made.
Don't use that.
I'm balls deep in this fandom, man. So, like, I'm part of it, but, like, you know, girls shrieking when Captain America comes on screen and that kind of stuff is kind of bugging me a little bit.
Yeah, man, I'm kind of glad that you brought that up, because I had a woman, I mean, because everybody that I work with knows that I'm like this huge nerd, and then I go see all these movies and stuff like that. And so this older woman that I work with came up to me on Friday, literally like went out of her way to go to my desk and was like, hey, when are you going to go see Infinity War, the new Avengers movie? I was like, oh, I saw it last night. She's like, oh, really? Like, I'm going to see it tomorrow or whatever day she said, and she was all excited about it. I was like, that's awesome. Like, she's this really old lady that I work with, and I was just super surprised. And she's like, I'm just a big fan of Thor. And she said it like all gross, and I was like, ooh, like, so I get what you're saying. It just, yeah, I mean, like, I just don't.
I love that people love this stuff that wouldn't have typically loved this stuff in the past if they love it for the right reasons. Like, just to go see hunks in a movie like that really bothers. I don't know why, but it bothers me.
If there weren't people like this, if there weren't people like that made these movies super, super popular, then maybe we don't get as many. So I don't know. Yeah, I mean, you kind of have to take the good with the bad.
Yeah, I mean, it's a silly thing to complain about, because at the end of the day, everybody's allowed to love what they love. And like, I'm definitely not the hipster that's like, only I'm allowed to love this because I read the comics and I know about the characters and yada, yada, yada. Like, I don't feel that way at all. It just bothers me that it reminds me of Twilight, I guess is what I'm getting at.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that, and maybe it's just because I've gotten better about it, but I feel like the gatekeeping around this stuff, as long as we've gone, has gotten better. And maybe it's just because I surround myself with better people now than I used to. I don't know, but it just feels like I don't have as much gatekeeping around this as much anymore. I will say, and we kind of talked about this a little bit before, speaking of gatekeeping, before we started recording, that I went and saw this again last night, and I left before the stinger. Like, as soon as the credits rolled, I was taken off, and I was getting like weird looks as I was walking out, because I was like the only one walking out, and I felt the urge to be like, I've already seen this before, like, I don't need to see the stinger again. Like, I still felt like I had to defend my nerddom, and that's ridiculous, because I don't give a shit what these people think. You're seeing the movie on a Saturday. I've already seen it once already, so you're obviously not that big of fans.
Yeah. No, I get what you're saying, man. So, all right, you ready to roll on with Nerd Favorite?
All right, so for those that skipped the spoiler section, we just had a really good discussion. You definitely should go back to it once you've seen this movie. But like I said before, we're going to talk about our top 5 Marvel Cinematic Universe films so far. I feel like this is a good time to kind of update that list, because Infinity War is such a huge part of this universe. So this is definitely going to be a way different version of Nerd Favorite than we normally do. So if this is your first episode, we normally just kind of ask a very nerdy question, what your favorite blank is, whatever the topic is from episode to episode. But like I said, it's going to be a lot different this particular episode. So we're just going to kind of give like a real quick blurb about each film and kind of why they fall where they fall in our list. So what is your, well, actually, you know what? We haven't really talked about how we want to do it. Do you just want to give your top 5 and you kind of do it straight, or do you want to bounce back and forth?
I think we just go, for brevity's sake, we each go 5 to 1.
Okay, cool. So what's your top 5 Marvel Cinematic Universe movies so far?
So I'll start with number 5. Number 5 is Infinity War. So definitely up there for me. It edged out Thor Ragnarok, which used to be my number 5. So obviously I love this movie quite a bit. And if you listen to the review, hopefully that came across. There were some gripes here or there. Number 4 for me is the Avengers, the first Avengers movie. I think that movie just holds a special place because it was the first time they ever did anything like this, and it was so exciting. And I do think that after I let Infinity War marinate a little bit, that it could possibly take that number 4 spot, because I did really like it, but for nostalgia's sake, I did put the original Avengers before it. Number 3 for me is Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 1. Just I love that movie to death. It's so much fun. It felt completely different from anything that Marvel had done up until that point. Those characters are great, so on and so forth. Number 2 is Civil War. So that movie just does so many things the right way. It's so good. The story's good. It introduces a lot of cool characters. Like the Giant Man scene is amazing. Spider-Man being in there is amazing. It just does everything right. And I think that it's better than any of the Avengers movies we've seen. And it's kind of an Avengers movie in its own right. So good stuff there. And then number 1 for me is not going to be a popular opinion, but I gotta speak from the heart here, and this is favorite, not best. So my favorite is Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2. So I've really, over the last year since that came out, really thought about it a lot, and for a while there, I wouldn't have put it before the first one. But I love the father-son story in that movie, and I think the soundtrack's better in that movie, and the villain is obviously way better than Ronan was in the first film. So I mean, up until Thanos, I think that Ego is probably one of the better Marvel villains. So just a lot of great things. The humor is amazing. I love Baby Groot. Just a lot of things hit for me in that movie. So it is still number 1 for me.
So we're pretty much fairly similar with our top 5s. So my 5th choice is Avengers, for basically the same reason that you said. It just kind of holds that special place in my heart as well. It kind of kicked off everything. Of course, Iron Man 2, and Captain America and all them, they actually kicked off the Marvel Cinematic Universe, but Avengers was the first time that they put all these characters together and they actually pulled it off, and it actually legitimately works still. Like it still works. It still holds up. So yeah, obviously I felt like I had to put that one in my top 5 just because it kind of kicked off these team up movies, and it really worked and proved that they could do this for the long haul. And then my number 4 was Thor Ragnarok. It basically pulled off the impossible, which it made Thor fun. Like it made a fun Thor movie. It's just so hilarious, and I mean, I just love that movie, and the Thor Hulk stuff is great. So yeah, I really didn't think that was possible, that you could make me really love a Thor movie, and they just did such a phenomenal job. My 3rd choice is one that you didn't bring up, and this is more of because I love the character so much, Spider-Man Homecoming. I do have a few issues with it here and there, but for the most part, it finally brought my favorite character, which is Spider-Man, to the Marvel Cinematic Universe. I think this movie was a little handcuffed by the other films because you kind of have to do a different route than those films to kind of separate yourself. And I think they just did the best possible job they could do given the films before it. So you kind of have to give it credit there. My second favorite is Infinity War that we just talked about, because it's such a huge deal within the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Like all the Avengers movies are supposed to end that phase, but this kind of felt like, and of course Avengers 4 is going to kind of finish the story, but it just felt like this was the real end to what we've been leading up to, because Thanos is such a big bad in the comics. Like honestly, you can only really think about maybe 2 other villains that carry the same weight as Thanos, maybe Galactus and maybe Doctor Doom. I'd like to personally put in Green Goblin just because he's such a cool Spider-Man villain, but I doubt he even carries that weight. So it's really just Thanos and maybe those other 2. So we've been waiting for him, and I'm just so glad that they did such a good job with that movie. That might be a little knee-jerk to put it that high, but I've really, really enjoyed that movie. And then number 1, I kind of felt like I needed to just put 1 Guardians in this movie, or in this list, and I chose Volume 2 for a lot of the same reasons. I wouldn't have if you asked me about 6 months ago, but we've had this discussion a couple of times, and I think you've kind of convinced me that Volume 2 is the far superior movie, and I think it's mostly because that it's basically the same film, except for it has a better villain. I won't agree with you on the soundtrack. I do think Volume 1 has a better soundtrack than Volume 2, but yeah, I think the villain in in Volume 2 is just far superior. And they're essentially the same movie as far as the tone and everything. And the comedy, I think, works in both of the films. And so, yeah, I think that 2 is better than 1 in this rare case just because the villain is better.
That's surprising to me because it wasn't even on your top 10 of 2017.
Yeah, I've definitely come around to this movie for sure.
Because I felt like a dumbass when that was my number 1 pick for 2017, and you and Matt both didn't bring it up on your lists. So that's like branded in my brain that moment. So no, obviously I don't feel like a dumbass. Like I like what I like, but that was surprising to me. So it's cool to see we're on the same page with that.
Yeah, for sure. Like I said, if you had asked me this question, or I mean, it was my question. It was my week for nerd favorite. But like 6 months ago, I probably would have just put Guardians of the Galaxy. But I honestly, I felt like I shouldn't care about this, but we've talked about this before. Like we care about these lists. And so I feel like I didn't want to put both of them in there, because honestly, I would have put both of them in there, but I felt like that was almost like my default Guardians of the Galaxy slot. So
yeah. So for what it's worth, I keep a running tally. Like I have this as a list on my Letterboxd, so that's a good place to plug my Letterboxd. That Tyler Hunt, so I didn't even have to really prep. Like I already had it. So that's kind of where I fell with why both of them are on my top 5.
Cool, man. All right, so that is it for one of our longer episodes that we've had in a while. Obviously, I hope that you nerds enjoyed it as we did. As always, you can follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. The Twitter and Instagram is at The Nerds Podcast. Like us on Facebook, like I said. Follow us on Google+. You can check us out on iTunes, Stitcher Radio, basically any good podcast you use. We're on it. Check out our YouTube channel, and Nerds You're Looking For, where I'm currently playing, finally finishing up Celeste. I'm playing Far Cry 5. I'm also playing Kingdom Come Deliverance. I'm streaming God of War. Tyler and I will probably be streaming Fortnite every once in a while, every Fortnite Friday, as Tyler hates it when I call it that, so I like to troll him a little bit. You can also email us at thenerdyourlookingfor@gmail.com. And finally, you can vote for us for Podcast of the Month at podcastland.com. For Patrick Goon,
Tyler Hunt,
we are the Nerds You're Looking For. Take it easy, guys.
Later, guys.